Why would a company have security escort me through the lobby at 10:18 a.m. like I had stolen something, then lose $18 million in client contracts before the month ended? Because the clients knew exactly who had been doing the work. They expected me to leave embarrassed, unemployed, and silent. Instead, I left with my records, my reputation, and the trust of the people their executives thought belonged to the company. By the time they understood the difference, their biggest accounts were already gone. Every story here is about someone who got underestimated and made them regret it. My name is Lisa Reyes, and for 12 years, I worked for a commercial benefits brokerage called Calder and Finch. We helped mid-sized companies negotiate health insurance, retirement plans, disability coverage, and employee benefits packages. It sounds simple if you have never done it. It is not. Every renewal came with deadlines. Every deadline came with a carrier trying to increase rates. Every rate increase came with a business owner asking whether you had actually protected them or just forwarded paperwork. A company could have 400 employees, 900 employees, or 2,500 employees. One bad benefits decision could cost them millions. One missed compliance notice could trigger penalties. One poorly handled renewal could turn an HR director into your former client before lunch. That was the world I worked in. I started at Calder and Finch when I was 27. At first, I handled small accounts. A local construction company with 63 employees. A food distributor with 114. A medical billing firm that called every Wednesday because their owner did not understand the difference between deductibles and copays. I learned quickly that the job was not about selling insurance. It was about being the person clients called when they were worried. I answered my phone. I explained things clearly. I did not make promises I could not keep. And when a carrier made a mistake, I stayed on the line until it was fixed. Over time, clients began asking for me by name, not Calder and Finch. Me. That distinction mattered more than anyone in the executive suite understood. By my 10th year, I managed 41 client relationships. The annual revenue attached to my book was a little over $9.6 million. More important than the number was the retention rate. 97%. Clients stayed because they trusted me. I knew the owner of a regional trucking company had a son with a chronic health condition and could not afford a disruption in coverage. I knew the HR director at a manufacturing firm had inherited a mess from her predecessor and needed every answer in writing. I knew the CEO of our largest client hated surprises, long presentations, and anyone who used the phrase "circle back" without saying what they meant. I did not just know their policies. I knew their pressure. Then the firm hired Victoria Lang. Victoria came in as Chief Revenue Officer. She was 36, polished, ambitious, and very good at making a room feel like she was doing everyone a favor by entering it. She had worked at a national brokerage before Calder and Finch. She talked about scale. She talked about leverage. She talked about moving clients from relationship dependence to institutional loyalty. That was Victoria's favorite phrase. Institutional loyalty. She said it at quarterly meetings. She said it in executive calls. She said it whenever someone like me mentioned that clients wanted a consistent point of contact. Her belief was simple. No client should be loyal to an employee. Clients should be loyal to the brand. On paper, that sounds reasonable. In reality, it became an excuse to treat the people earning client trust as interchangeable. Victoria did not like that I had strong relationships. She saw them as a risk. Not because I had ever threatened to leave. Not because I had ever withheld information. But because my clients trusted someone she could not control with a dashboard. Within her first 6 months, she changed everything. She moved account service teams into pods. She assigned junior relationship managers to meetings they were not ready to lead. She told us to stop giving clients our direct numbers. She began recording every client call for quality calibration. And she started requiring us to copy her on renewal strategy emails for accounts above $1 million. At first, I tried to work with her. I gave her client history. I walked her through risk areas. I explained why some customers needed a personal conversation before a rate increase appeared in their inbox. Victoria listened with her head tilted slightly to one side. Then she said the same thing every time. "Lisa, You are confusing familiarity with value. That line became her signature. Familiarity with value. As if 12 years of preventing disasters was just a habit clients had developed. As if trust was a weakness because it could not be measured in a slideshow. The real conflict began with our largest account. Stonebridge Logistics had 1,840 employees across 7 states. Their annual benefits spend was nearly $30 million. Their renewal was scheduled for October 1st. And their CEO, Warren Cole, had been with Calder and Finch for 15 years. I had managed the relationship for 8 of those years. 2 months before renewal, I discovered that their carrier had made a pricing assumption that would raise Stonebridge's projected costs by 14.2%. That was not a normal increase. That was a crisis. I spent 3 weeks building alternatives. I negotiated with 2 carriers. I worked through utilization reports with Stonebridge's HR team. I built a plan that would reduce the projected increase to 4.8% without cutting critical coverage. Victoria looked at the proposal for less than 5 minutes. Then she said she wanted to use a different carrier. Not because their plan was better. Because that carrier had offered Calder and Finch a higher commission arrangement. I told her Stonebridge would see through it. She smiled. Lisa, you are confusing familiarity with value. I told her the client had asked for a recommendation based on employee impact, not our internal revenue. She said the final recommendation was an executive decision. I documented my objection. I sent the analysis. I included the client's stated priorities. Then I did what I had always done. I protected the client as far as my authority allowed. A week later, at 10:02 a.m. on a Monday, I got a calendar invite titled Client Coverage Alignment. Victoria was there. The managing partner was there. And so was a security supervisor named Mark, standing near the conference room door. That was when I knew it was not a normal meeting. Victoria told me the firm had identified a pattern of inappropriate client dependency. She said I had failed to properly transition relationships into the pod structure. She said my conduct created business continuity concerns. Then she said my employment was ending immediately. I looked at the managing partner. He would not meet my eyes. I looked at Victoria. She looked completely composed. Then she said, to protect the firm, we need to collect your devices and escort you out. Escort me out. Like I had done something wrong. Like the clients whose renewals I had saved were evidence against me. Mark stood beside me while I packed my bag. He walked me past people I had worked with for over a decade. No one said anything. Not because they agreed. Because they were shocked. At 10:18 a.m., I walked through the front lobby carrying one cardboard box, my jacket, and a folder containing my personal employment records. Victoria watched from the glass conference room. She thought she had made an example of me. What she did not understand was that the clients had already started asking why the person they trusted had disappeared. Victoria thought client loyalty could be transferred with an announcement and a new email signature. What she did not know is that Stonebridge had a contract clause I had insisted on adding 2 years earlier, after a previous service failure. It gave them a choice that no one at Calder and Finch had remembered to mention in the meeting where they escorted me out. I did not call a client when I left Calder and Finch. That is important. I did not send a dramatic email. I did not post anything online. I did not tell anyone I had been escorted out. My separation agreement was clear. I could not use confidential information. I could not solicit clients. I could not disparage the company. And I had no intention of doing any of those things. I went home. I put the cardboard box on the dining room table. Inside was a framed photo of my wife and daughter, a coffee mug from a Stonebridge charity golf event, 2 notebooks, and a small engraved award from my 7th year at the firm. The award said, "Client First." I turned it over in my hands for a while. Then I put it back in the box. At 11:06 a.m., my phone rang. It was Melissa Grant, Stonebridge's HR director. I had known Melissa for 8 years. I did not answer. She called again. Then she sent a text. "Lisa, please call me. We were told you are no longer handling our account. Is everything okay?" I stared at the message. I wanted to say a lot. I wanted to say that I had been removed because I objected to a recommendation that would make Calder and Finch more money while giving Stonebridge a worse result. I wanted to say that Victoria had treated trust like a company asset she could seize. I wanted to say that I had been escorted out under the watch of security while the people responsible for a $30 million renewal pretended nothing was wrong. But I did not. I forwarded the message to my attorney. Then I replied with one sentence. I am no longer with Calder and Finch. Please direct any account questions to the firm. That was all. 3 minutes later, Melissa replied. Can you at least tell me whether the renewal plan you presented is still valid? I did not answer. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because I was no longer authorized to advise her. And because I knew that whatever happened next had to come from Calder and Finch, not from me. At 1:30 p.m., I received an email from a former coworker. Victoria had scheduled an emergency call with Stonebridge. She had introduced herself as the new executive sponsor. She told the client there had been an internal realignment designed to provide stronger strategic coverage. That phrase spread through the office quickly. Stronger strategic coverage. It was what Victoria called removing the person who knew the account and replacing him with 3 people who had never attended a renewal meeting. Stonebridge asked why I had been removed. Victoria said she could not discuss personnel matters. Fair enough. Then Stonebridge asked whether the recommendation I had presented was still the firm's recommendation. Victoria said the firm was evaluating all options. That was her first visible mistake. She had no idea what she had just done. Stonebridge's CEO did not like uncertainty, especially not 2 months before a renewal. Especially not after his HR team had spent 3 weeks reviewing a plan they believed was final. At 3:47 p.m., Melissa sent Victoria an email requesting a written confirmation that the plan would not change without Stonebridge's approval. Victoria replied that Calder and Finch retained discretion to recommend the best available solution. That sentence reached me later through my attorney. Not because anyone had violated a rule. Because Stonebridge's legal team had copied the correspondence into a formal notice. By Tuesday morning, Stonebridge had invoked the client governance clause. The clause was simple. If Calder and Finch made a material change in the designated relationship leadership during an active renewal cycle, Stonebridge could require a 30-day service transition review. During that review, Stonebridge could suspend any recommended carrier move, request all renewal analyses, and interview alternative brokers without penalty. Victoria had fired me believing she was protecting the firm from relationship dependence. Instead, she had triggered a clause that gave our largest client permission to test the market at the worst possible time. At 9:18 a.m. Tuesday, Calder and Finch's managing partner called me. His name was Howard Bell. He had been at the firing meeting. He had said nothing while security escorted me out. Now he sounded uneasy. Lisa, he said, I want you to know we appreciate everything you have done here. I said, that is not how it felt yesterday. He paused. Then he said, there are some concerns with Stonebridge. I assumed there might be. We need to understand the history. The history is documented in the account files. Victoria says there are pieces that only you know. I leaned back in my chair. Then Victoria should have considered that before ending my employment. Howard did not like that answer. But he could not argue with it. He asked if I would take a call with the firm. I said I would consider a written consulting proposal after my separation terms were finalized. He said this was urgent. I said, I understand. That does not change the need for an agreement. There was silence. Then he said he would have legal contact me. By noon, the first proposal arrived. It was almost insulting. They offered me a 2-week consulting arrangement at my old daily equivalent. No guarantee of payment. No protection from liability. No authority to make recommendations. And no acknowledgement that the firm had publicly escorted me out the day before. They wanted me to return quietly, repair the relationship, and disappear again once the danger passed. I declined. I did not send an angry response. I sent a clear one. A 60-day consulting agreement. Payment in advance. Defined authority over the Stonebridge transition process. A written statement that I would not be required to endorse any recommendation I did not believe served the client. And one condition that made Victoria furious. Any client-facing communication involving Stonebridge would require my review before it was sent. Not because I wanted control. Because I had seen what happened when she treated a serious client like a line item. At 2:42 p.m., Howard called again. He said Victoria believed my terms were unreasonable. I said, Victoria believed I was replaceable. We are now seeing the cost of that belief. He said, Lisa, this is not personal. I answered, it became personal when your firm put security next to me and walked me through the lobby like I was a threat. That was the first satisfying turn. Not because I wanted them embarrassed. Because for the first time, they had to acknowledge that urgency does not erase how you treated someone. If you have ever watched a company disrespect the person holding everything together, subscribe, because this was the moment their biggest clients began deciding exactly who they trusted. By Wednesday, the situation had become worse. Stonebridge's legal team requested every document related to the renewal. Every carrier quote. Every analysis. Every meeting note. Every internal recommendation. That request made Victoria nervous. She had changed the recommendation after I submitted my analysis. She had not changed it openly. She had created a revenue alignment model that ranked carriers partly by compensation paid to Calder and Finch. The document did not say, choose the carrier that pays us more. It used polished language. Strategic partnership value. Long-term commercial alignment. Expanded service capacity. But the numbers told the story. The carrier Victoria preferred would cost Stonebridge more. It would provide less favorable network access in two of their largest employee locations. And it would pay Calder and Finch nearly $640,000 more over the contract period. The document was not supposed to leave the executive folder. But Stonebridge had requested all materials used to support the final recommendation. Calder and Finch's legal team had a choice. Provide it. Or explain why they would not. At 4:10 p.m., Howard finally accepted my consulting terms. At 4:32 p.m., I signed. At 4:45 p.m., I was officially retained as an independent consultant. Not an employee. Not someone reporting to Victoria. Not someone who could be escorted out whenever I became inconvenient. I had a scope. I had boundaries. And I had the authority to speak about the work I had spent 8 years protecting. The next morning, I joined the Stonebridge transition call. Victoria was already there. Her voice was bright. Too bright. She introduced me as an external resource supporting continuity. I did not correct her. I did not need to. The client knew exactly who I was. Melissa spoke first. She said Stonebridge had spent years trusting Calder and Finch because the firm promised independent advice. She said the sudden removal of the relationship manager, followed by uncertainty around the renewal recommendation, had made that promise feel questionable. Then she asked a simple question. Lisa, do you still stand behind the proposal you originally presented? Victoria shifted in her chair. I could hear it through the phone. I said yes. Based on the available data, I believe it remains the strongest option for Stonebridge's employees and long-term cost stability. Melissa asked, and does Calder and Finch still stand behind it? That was the question Victoria did not want. Howard was on the call. So was legal. So was Victoria. Nobody answered for several seconds. Finally, Howard said, we are reviewing all materials to ensure our recommendation reflects Stonebridge's stated priorities. That was corporate language for panic. Stonebridge gave them 48 hours. 48 hours to explain why the recommendation had changed. 48 hours to explain why I had been removed. 48 hours to prove the firm was still acting in the client's interest. That was when Victoria began to realize she did not just need my knowledge. She needed my credibility. And credibility is much harder to recover after you have tried to humiliate the person who earned it. The final meeting happened Friday at 8 a.m. Stonebridge's CEO joined. Their legal counsel joined. Their chief financial officer joined. On Calder and Finch's side, Howard was there, Victoria was there, the general counsel was there, and I was there as an independent consultant. The call began quietly. That was what made it worse. Stonebridge's CEO did not raise his voice. He did not accuse anyone. He simply said, We need to decide whether we can trust Calder and Finch with this renewal. Then he asked Victoria to explain the change in recommendation. Victoria started with the carrier's broader capabilities. She talked about national scale. She talked about wellness resources. She talked about service modernization. Then Stonebridge's CFO interrupted. Does this carrier cost us more? Victoria paused. Not when you consider the total value proposition. That was not my question. Another pause. Yes, she said. The projected premium is higher. By how much? Approximately 6.1% relative to the other option. The CFO looked down at his papers. Does it provide a stronger network in Ohio and Pennsylvania? Victoria said the network was comparable. The CFO asked again. Does it? No, she said. Then Stonebridge's legal counsel asked the final question. Does Calder and Finch receive greater compensation if Stonebridge selects this carrier? The silence that followed was long enough that I could hear someone typing. Victoria tried to answer carefully. She said compensation was only one of several commercial factors. The legal counsel stopped her. That was not the question. Victoria said yes. The CEO did not look angry. That would have been easier for Victoria. He looked disappointed. Then he asked Howard why I had been removed in the middle of the renewal. Howard tried to explain the pod model, the institutional continuity strategy, the need to reduce relationship concentration. The CEO listened without interrupting. Then he said, "You escorted the person who had managed our account for 8 years out of your office. You changed a recommendation without consulting us. And now we are learning that the change would have made your firm more money while costing us more. Is that your institutional continuity strategy?" Nobody answered. Because there was no answer. Then the CEO turned to me. "Lisa, if you were advising us independently, what would you tell us to do?" I took a breath. This was the moment I had been careful not to chase. I did not want revenge. I did not want to damage Calder and Finch. I wanted the truth to be clear. So I said, I would tell you to choose the option that best serves your employees and your financial stability. I would also tell you that you should work with a broker whose incentives are fully transparent and whose leadership does not change the recommendation for reasons that are not in your interest. The CEO nodded. Then he said something that changed everything. We have already begun interviews with other firms. Victoria sat very still. Howard asked if there was anything Calder and Finch could do to restore confidence. The CEO said, not today. Stonebridge did not terminate the relationship on that call. They did something more damaging. They opened the business to competition. For the next 3 weeks, Calder and Finch had to watch the account they had treated like guaranteed revenue become uncertain. Other clients noticed. They always do. A regional healthcare group asked whether their renewal recommendation had been influenced by carrier compensation. A manufacturing client requested a review of their service team after hearing I had left. A construction company sent Howard an email asking why their longtime account manager had been removed without notice. Nobody needed me to contact them. They were already asking questions. By the end of the month, Stonebridge selected another brokerage. Not a massive national firm. A smaller company led by 2 former benefits executives who promised direct access and transparent compensation. They hired me as a senior advisor 2 weeks later. Not because I asked Stonebridge to follow me. I did not. Not because I gave them confidential information. I did not. They made their own decision after Calder and Finch gave them every reason to question the relationship. Stonebridge was not the only client to leave. For others moved their business over the next 6 months. Together, the lost revenue was just over $18 million. Calder and Finch had survived difficult years before. Market downturns, carrier exits, economic slowdowns. But this was different. This was trust leaving the building. Victoria remained at the firm for another 4 months. Then the board asked her to resign. They did not say it was because of Stonebridge. Companies rarely say the plain thing. They called it a strategic leadership transition. But everyone knew. She had tried to prove that clients were loyal to a logo. Instead, she proved that a logo means nothing when the people behind it stop acting with integrity. As for Howard, he called me once after I joined the new firm. He asked whether I would consider coming back. He said things had changed. He said they understood my value now. I told him I appreciated the call. Then I said, "You understood my value when it was convenient. You just did not protect it when it mattered." He did not argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. Maybe because the empty client roster had finally taught him what 12 years of work had not. The day they escorted me out, I walked through that lobby feeling the weight of every pair of eyes on me. I thought they were trying to make me feel small. But later, I understood what really happened. They showed everyone exactly how they treated the person who had spent years protecting their clients. And the clients noticed. The lesson is not that clients belong to you. They do not. Clients have choices. They should have choices. And no professional should treat a relationship like private property. But companies make a dangerous mistake when they assume relationships can be transferred without respect, preparation, or trust. If you are the person managing critical accounts, protect yourself the right way. Document your work. Keep clean records. Make your recommendations in writing. Be transparent about why you are recommending something. And understand the agreements you sign before you leave. Do not take confidential information. Do not contact people you are legally restricted from contacting. Do not turn frustration into a decision you regret. Your strongest position is not breaking rules. It is knowing them. It is knowing that your credibility travels with you because you earned it honestly. And if a company tries to humiliate you, stay calm. Let their behavior speak for itself. Clients are smart. Good employees are smart. The people who matter can usually tell the difference between someone being removed for cause and someone being pushed out because they refuse to compromise. Being untouchable does not mean you cannot be fired. It means that when someone tries to erase your contribution, the evidence of your character is already sitting in every relationship you built. The next story begins when a finance director blamed a junior accountant for a $4.2 million reporting error and fired her before the board meeting. What he did not know was that she had scheduled an automated email to the audit committee 3 days earlier, and it included every spreadsheet version he had quietly changed. Subscribe, because when that email arrives at 7 a.m., he is not the one asking questions anymore.